Oh, I wish I believed in wishing wells. Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who in specific time. And this time we're talking about a second Doctor story, The Mind Robber. This one is one that I have seen before. I checked it out years ago when I was first starting to dip into classic, but it's been so long. Well, I watched it before I even had the channel, so I didn't do any kind of review on it at the time. And also, it has been so long at this point, I needed a rewatch if I was going to talk about it. Partially because my memory latched onto a couple of specific moments and definitely the overall premise of the thing. I didn't remember a ton of specifics, especially about how it ended. I could not remember the resolution of this at all. So I definitely needed to revisit it. This is an odd one, and it's a kind of story that I would like to see the show try to get away with again, because it's a level of fantasy, not just science fiction, but like fantasy, that is not something Doctor Who does often. I'd say the closest anything recent has come to doing this is maybe Last Christmas, with the integration of a character like Santa Claus. Perhaps a little bit Robots of Sherwood, but even those, like a decent chunk of it is just dedicated to the idea of, well, you shouldn't be here, you're not real, and in a way that feels like it's apologizing for their presence, whereas here, not so much. So our starting premise, following on from the end of the previous story, the TARDIS is about to be encased in lava, and as an emergency measure, the Doctor is actually able to move the TARDIS out of reality altogether. Where it puts them, that's the question, isn't it? And this is the second Doctor, Jamie, of course, and Zoe, which is a good team. And I love Jamie. I love the second Doctor and Jamie so much. But it puts them in what is effectively, at least at first glance, a void. And it's not a badly done void for the time in which it was made, all things considered. But where it kind of ends up being is effectively the land of make-believe. It's populated by fictional things, be they the lead character from Gulliver's Travels, be they Rapunzel, the Minotaur, Medusa. These things that just aren't real, but they're here. And they do appear to be somewhat limited by what their conception is in the myth or story that they come from. But they're just here, wandering around. At the same time, we have these sort of toy soldiers that appear to be hunting the Doctor and the companions. And there is whispers of the Master. Not that Master. That Master has not been created yet. You have to get to the Jon Pertwee era for him. No, it is just an ominous term given to whoever appears to be running and in charge of this place. He is referred to, and we don't see him until later. But it is like, I have no doubt there are some fan theories as to maybe how it could be, but like definitively, it's not that Master. It just isn't. The backstory we're given for who this person is, why they're there and what they're doing, it's not him. It can't be. It makes no sense. And whatever story tying into a knot you'd have to do to try and have it be him, I just don't think would be worth it. It's just a title. It's just what the beings in this reality call somebody. Let it go. But anyways, this does some really interesting and some frankly just off the wall stuff here and there. So somewhat famously, there is an episode where Fraser Hines does not play Jamie McCrimmon. So what happened was he came down with a case of the chicken pox. So he couldn't shoot for a little bit. But the character still needed to be there. So they came up with this whole thing where Jamie got turned into this sort of cardboard standee of himself. And his face was gone, and there were like pieces of faces over on this, and the doctor had to reassemble his face to get Jamie back, but he picked the wrong bits, and he ended up with someone who is very much Jamie, but doesn't look like Jamie, has the wrong face to cover for the fact that they had a different actor. And to his credit, the replacement actor they got, Hamish Wilson, is good. Captures Jamie very well from voice to mannerism, but like, that's not him. But it's just that's kind of what I mean by the level of fantasy involved in this, because that's effectively just magic. That's just weird magic in this place. And that's the level of, we don't have to have a basis in science for everything that you just don't get from Doctor Who very much anymore. Not to say Doctor Who is particularly hard science fiction, but at the same time, it generally tries to lean on the idea that there are actual scientific principles behind its nonsense. There is ultimately kind of an explanation for this, but like during the course of the story, it's like, no, this is just happening. And it is treated as these are things of make-believe, because the way that they have to try and fight back is to remind themselves these are not real. And if they can truly believe they aren't real, then they go away or they lose their power to harm them. So other thing, there's a unicorn in this, and it's presented as a dangerous thing that's going to kill them. So just on principle, love that. Just give me that. Give me more of that. So ultimately, the explanation, it's very odd. So the Master is a writer from, I think it's the 19th century, somewhere in there. It's why most of the points of reference that are put in are myth or somewhat older stories. And he is being manipulated by this alien intelligence to maintain this place. And the reason they pulled the Doctor here was for the Doctor to replace him, because he's been doing this a while. They need somebody newer and fresher. And there's some interesting quirks in how this writer, the Master, is played. Because I noticed early on, like, he seemed to have two voices. He seemed to have an almost robotic voice when issuing commands to things like the toy soldiers, or telling people to go and capture the Doctor. But then he'd have a more calm, sort of silky, like, ooh, yes, I am plotting kind of voice. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And there is an explanation for that, because basically when he's issuing the commands, it's almost as if the alien intelligence is speaking through him in those moments. And to see the performance where, like, in the moment he switches back and forth is pretty well done. It's not like the most amazing acting I've ever seen, but it's well handled. It's not an easy thing to do, to just switch on a dime and have it not just be silly or really jarring. But he does a good job with it. And there ultimately becomes kind of a battle of writing where he and the Doctor are sort of competitively trying to write whether the Doctor loses or wins, or whether his companions escape or are captured. And they can't just erase what the previous person had written, but it's kind of this back and forth, and then this happened, and like somehow captures them. It's like, but this, and it's just fun. It's just fun and enjoyable. And there's some neat little just jokes and twists on things. Like, I kind of like Rapunzel as a character. Like, she doesn't do much, but just how casual she is about people asking, can I borrow your hair as a rope? And she's like, yeah, sure. Everyone else does. So there's cute little moments like that. The pacing is okay. It's a bit up and down, especially in the first episode. There's periods where characters are trying to resist this almost sort of mental pull to leave the TARDIS and go out into what is initially, as I said, kind of a void. And it really does spend too long with just these sort of mental, like, no, I must resist. Like, it does that for longer than it's worth. A bit of this could have been filled out with more interesting stuff, or just tightened up a little bit. But that's not enough to derail it. And this just has a really unique flavor to it that is really fun. Like, and it's a good fit for the second Doctor. I think if there was any Doctor whose era was going to work with this kind of story, second Doctor, it makes the most sense. He just has that playfulness that works very well in this setting, in what is effectively the land of make-believe. So it's an odd one, especially as time went on and it became more and more and more of an outlier as Doctor Who kind of really truly settled into what it was going to be going forward. This feels more like an experiment rarely to be repeated, but it's still fun, and it's almost a glimpse into what if Doctor Who leaned into being more of a fantasy show than a sci-fi show. And I'm not going to say that that's what I would have preferred Doctor Who to be. I like what Doctor Who is. But it does feel like a little bit of a glimpse into a reality where maybe the show leaned in a different direction than where it later would. I enjoyed this one. I enjoyed this one a fair bit. It's weird, it's quirky, it's inventive. I like it. The Mind Robber. Have you rewatched this lately? Whatever your thoughts are on it, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon is what pays the bills. And that is also where folks voted to determine which classic Doctor I was going to tackle this month. And it ended up being the second Doctor. So you can vote in polls like that and other perks besides. Even if you can't do that, there's other things I do down in the description. Like, share, subscribe also help me out. And that costs you nothing. But don't worry too much about it. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can come on back next time you need a break. End of the video, so I gotta shout out my top patrons. Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfulla, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Oliver B., Angus Bjarnason, Melinda Walters, Imudelki, The Oath of Boyd, Katoria, Toy Lowly, Becky Sparks, Fernambulax the Poodle, Zach, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Tim Price, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Shayla Gourlay, and Brendan LaRose. Thanks for your support. If you want to hear me probably mispronounce your name as well, check out the rewards on the Patreon. How you doing there?